Well, since you asked,
Sure.
so yeah, this is a good day. Well, welcome back, everyone. Yes, welcome back. So all right. Well, welcome back, everyone. Today.
Okay, I know.
No, that's quite all right. I understand. This has been an interesting week for a lot of people. We're approximately 51% of the population, I would say, or 49, depending on how you look at it. It's been that kind of a week for me. Found out I had to get a crown, another crown on one of my teeth. So, but I am quite, devastated because this week, well, actually just on the way up, Debbie pointed out to me that we had watched a Hollywood movie that wasn't realistic. I'm like, wait.
The first one?
What are you saying about Hollywood movies, dear? I don't know. So yeah. Big week this past week. Several of us are, I'm guessing, very happy, and I'm guessing several of us are not very happy. I went into the election with low expectations, and I wasn't disappointed. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say. Moving on this date, November 10th. November 10th in history. It was on this date in 355 that Bishop Donatus died. I know. Should we just take the day off because this is the death day of Donatus? Well, Donatus was the person for whom the Donatist, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but hey, it's 2,000 years ago, controversy was named. And what that is this is getting back to the question about Constantine. Remember we talked about Constantine 2 or 3 weeks ago. And prior to Constantine's, the shift in the attitude toward Christianity in the Roman Empire, prior to that, there were church members and leaders and all that were accosted and confronted by the religious or by the civil authorities and told to, cut it out, give it up, throw in the towel, give us all your information, whatever, surrender, stop doing that. And some of them did, and some of them didn't. Okay, so some of them gave in to the civil authorities, and some of them did not. And then after and everybody knew who everybody apparently, because it was a much smaller world, but everybody knew who everybody was. This bishop gave in, and this bishop did not. And when when what happened was when Christianity became accepted, and then it became approved. Those who had given in, who had surrendered, given up, quit preaching, do whatever, were called traditors, Traditor. It kind of looks like traitor, but it's traditor, and I believe it's the Latin word for surrender, or comes from the Latin word for surrender. So the people who had given up were called traditors. Okay, and so then after Christianity becomes legal, approved, accepted, whatever, maybe not in that order, these guys, several of these guys, wanted back in. Hey, I used to be a bishop, I should be a bishop now. And those who had not given up said, no, if you want to come back in, you need to start from the beginning. Go back to Bible college, go back to go through the whole, or they were just cut out altogether. And this was a huge split over the in the church. It was called the Donatist controversy, and Donatus was the one that refused to let the traditors back in, or would not support the reinstatement of these guys who had surrendered, because not everyone did. See, that's the point. It's not a question that everyone did. It's like some did, some didn't. Okay, so some supported the government or gave into the government, others did not. And so this was a huge controversy, and it probably, I don't know that it the specific one would have ended when everybody died out. Within 100 years, everybody had died out. So But that was on this date in 355. Today it's Martin Luther's birthday. So happy birthday, Martin. You are I should have done the math on this. Born in 1483. So what is that? 541 years old, something like that. 541 years old, born on this date. Later, speaking of people who didn't get along with authority, Martin Luther, born on this date. It was on this date in 1871 that Henry Morton Stanley found David Livingstone in Africa. You know the Dr. Livingstone, I presume, if you grew up and heard that story. You know, my dad would always say things like this, that no, he didn't, Dr. Livingstone wasn't lost, kind of thing. It's like, you know, when you would tell my dad, hey, Columbus discovered America, he'd say, no, he didn't, America was never lost, kind of thing. I'm like, okay, Dad. But what I find interesting, Livingstone was you know, a well-known explorer, and Henry Morton Stanley became an even better known explorer. Although, you know, we remember this Dr. Livingstone, I presume, kind of thing, and all of that. And but Stanley became, again, no relation to me, of course, but Stanley became quite the explorer, although he was a fairly vicious one. His idea of exploring was to shoot first, ask questions later. That he would travel very heavily armed through Africa, and if he came into a community, a hut, a town, a village, or whatever, and did not immediately get obeisance or welcoming, or, you know, kind of a flattering sort of welcome, he would just shoot the town up, kill multiple people. And he's, you know, one of the heroes of the white exploration of Africa. So be that as it may. But that was on this date in 1871. Now, it was on this date, but I have two different years for it, so I don't know which one is correct, I'll confess. So it was on this date either in 1908 or 1910 that the Gideons put their first Bible in a hotel room. So since that, and I don't think they're still doing that. It's been a while since I don't believe they still. I know you can still find them, but I don't think they're actively doing that anymore. I think that kind of went away. I don't know if it was a COVID thing or just because of phones and Bibles on phones and things like that. Yeah, I have too. I've seen the Book of Mormon and the Gideon Bible in there as well. But it was on this date. I mean, it was, you know, it's interesting. I'm sure somebody has done a study somewhere on the number of people who actually did pick up a Gideon Bible and read it for the first time. And it's you know, what's interesting about it is, or one of the interesting things about that whole thing is that you always knew that there'd be a Bible in the hotel room, kind of thing. So a person always in a hotel room for years and years and years and years, you just knew there'd be a Bible in that hotel room. But that was on this date. I'm going to go with 1910, just because that was the first year I found. But it was on this date in 1924. Where were you? Where were you on this date in 100 years ago? 100 years ago today. The Dion O'Banion. Name ring a bell? Yet? Dion O'Banion, leader of the Northside Gang, was assassinated in his flower shop by Johnny Torrio's gang, Northside Chicago, by Johnny Torrio's gang. Okay, this was a big thing in the crime world in the 1920s Chicago. Torrio was, you know, later got under such heat. I believe he was shot several times, and he decided he would leave Chicago. And when he left Chicago, he turned his operations over to his ace assistant, Al Capone. So that's where Al Capone comes from. He was in Johnny Torrio's gang. So on this day in 1933, James Rowe died. James Rowe, famous hymn writer, best known song, I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within. Love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. That's a song that I remember for two reasons. One, because of when I grew up, that was one of the few songs that the pianist could play. There was only a hand, but, you know, at first there were only two, and then there were about 3 or 4. So there's like a handful of hymns that I know in backwards, forwards, left, right. You know, at Calvary, love lifted me. When the roll is called up yonder. Okay, those ones. It's like I know every chord change, every key change. It's like So yeah, 35. So, but yeah, he died on this date in 1933. The other reason I know it is because of a parody version I heard of the song a few years later, which I am not going to share with you, because the trouble is the parody version ruined the song for me. So whenever I hear the song, I immediately go to the parody version of the song. So in essence, it's kind of ruined. It's ruined the song for me. So please don't do or pass along parody versions of hymns. If you want to do a parody version of the Beatles song, knock yourself out. But not of the hymns. So that in 1969, for those of you who have kids, you remember this date in 1969 because it was on this date in 1969 that Sesame Street premiered. So I'm just speaking of my age, I'm just a little too old to have appreciated Sesame Street at the time. So it was, and then a little later, a couple of years later, there was the Electric Company. Anybody remember the Electric Company? And then Zoom. There was Zoom for a while, and then Barney, and I think the world came to an end then. I think once Barney came along. Now Barney, that was a realistic show from Hollywood, right? Not like the movies, apparently. I can't count on them. And finally, it was on this date in 1989 that they give this date as the date that the Berlin Wall fell, which is a really interesting story. I believe we all lived through it. But if you get into like the details of how that all happened, it was a mistake. It was all a mistake. And that is that they did not mean to open the border. The East Germans did not mean to open the border. They decided that there was pressure. There were a lot of protests, and it was a kind of very tough time. And so they decided to have a press conference, and they put a guy in front of the cameras who had not a lot of experience being in front of the cameras. And they started asking him questions, and he misread the directions. And when he misread the directions said the border is going to be open as of such and such a date. Border's going to be wide open. I'm not going to check people at the border. That was not what the lesson said. However, it went out on all the news, and somebody questioned him. So he said the borders are going to be open. And somebody, wait a minute. Go back to that. Are you saying the borders are going to be open? And the guy, they're saying he's looking at it. And if you ever watch this video, it's in German, but it's kind of, you can see that he's not. That's what I'm reading. It's going to be open as of such and such a time. And so then what happened was there was this huge influx of people to the border that they weren't expecting, and then it became a nightmare, just in terms of the number of people, and because everybody was watching to see what happened, and so they gave the word and opened the border, and next thing you know, and they started chipping the wall down. I have not actually seen the Berlin Wall in Germany, having not been to Germany. I have seen, I think it's 3 portions of the wall. There's one at the Gerald Ford Museum. There's one at the Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati. I don't know why there's one there, but the National, yeah. And we saw one somewhere else. And where did we see the third one?
I don't know. Might have been one of the other president places.
Okay. So they are, they're usually about 6 to 8 feet wide and about 12 feet tall, kind of thing. But that happened on this date in 1989. So, all right, last week we ended up in 1 Samuel 13, at the end of Samuel 13, where we talked about how the Philistines had a lock on all of the technology, that they didn't have swords. They were only fighting with arrows and spears and, not metal. The Philistines had all of that. And there was this huge army standing up against the Philistines, against the Israelites, and they were not what's going to happen. So I have here with apologies to Lin-Manuel Miranda. When we last left our heroes, the Israelites were outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, outplanned. For those of you who have seen Hamilton, that's how they describe the situation there. Outmanned, outgunned, outnumbered, outplanned. Again, it's not mine. It's Lin-Manuel Miranda. I don't want to be taking credit for that. So, a detachment of Philistines. I'm in verse 23 of chapter 13. Now, a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash. Okay, now Michmash is an area right between Jericho and Jerusalem. Okay, so there's this pass there, and if you have your map, this is just north of Gibeah and a little further north of Jerusalem. Okay, remember last week we talked about how they were lined up. They said that access to the north and from the north was blocked by the Philistines. So you have the Israelites on the south, and you have the Philistines on the north. Okay, so there's this, and the Philistines have this huge, massive army. Okay, so it is not looking good for the Israelites. Okay, so one day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Okay, a group of Philistines go to a pass at Michmash between Jerusalem and Jericho. Jonathan and his armor bearer decide to attack the Philistines, but Saul is not told. Okay, so again, I pointed out last week that Jonathan is like the exemplar of the book. Okay, I mean, this is a guy, the more I read about Jonathan, the sorrier I feel for him. It's like Jonathan is the example. Jonathan is the guy who is always doing what's right. He's the one who has everything to gain and loses it all over nothing that he has done in the book. Okay, now, again, it's what's in the text. He may have been a rotten person, but I doubt it. I think the text would have said something about it. But he's just like, what a guy. Jonathan is the one we want. Jonathan is the kind of guy that, if I want to have a leader, Jonathan is my guy. Okay. But so Jonathan is, instead of waiting for now perhaps this is a little impetuous, I don't know, but rather than waiting for the army to do something or waiting for any attack, Jonathan says to his armor bearer, now this would be like his squire, his assistant, his, guy that carried his stuff for him, He could have been probably a similar age. He was probably young. Jonathan was young. Could have been talented in battle as well. Let's give it to him here. Let's say, so you got these two guys that are going to go attack the Philistines. Two of them. Okay. Now we know there are 3,000 chariots out there. There's an innumerable number of men. And Jonathan says, you know what? Let's go cause some trouble. Let's go do something here. Okay. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. Okay. Now the section is, this is a crisis moment, right? This is an existential moment for Israel here. And what is Saul doing? Oh, he's sitting under a tree. Okay, well, okay. Now there may have been important stuff to do underneath that tree, but he's just like, okay, shouldn't you be like in a war council or something? But that's where he is. And with him were about 600 men. Now we know that because from the previous story in chapter 13, remember he had started with 2,000, and then as they're waiting for Samuel to come along, about 1,400 of them squirrel away, and now he's left with 600 men. So he still has his 600 men. Okay, and that's an interesting number because David is going to tool around with a group of 600 men as well. I'm surprised that nobody's ever thought of a church model that's based on 600 men, that once you reach 600 men in your church, that's it. We move on, we start another church or something. I don't know. It's just never. There have been weirder things. So.
Is that the Church of the Leper Day? Isn't that 600?
I don't know. That's a good question. Half a league onward into the valley of death, road to 600. Yes. 600, yes. So maybe we don't want to have 600 men. Maybe 601. 700, yes. Yeah. So with him were about 600 men. So maybe they're all sitting there under the tree waiting for something to happen, waiting for a sign, waiting for an idea, waiting for something, okay? Among him was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod, okay? He was a son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. Okay, so Jonathan, apparently, I don't know, what are they doing underneath this tree? Are they sleeping? Are they resting? Are they playing cards? Engrossed in their phones. I don't know what they're doing, but there's 600 of them, and Jonathan and his armor bearer. Okay, and again, remember, Jonathan has got one of the two swords, right? So he's able to get up and walk away. Now maybe he does it at night. I don't know, but he's able to get up and walk away, and nobody really notices that he's gone. Okay, I know that because later on they're like, "Hey, who's missing?" So nobody's really knows he's gone. He's there. Saul is there, and he's got Ahijah with him. Now Ahijah is Eli's grandson. Okay, so if you remember, Eli's I forget which one of the brothers' wives has a child, and the child is named Ichabod, meaning the glory is departed, kind of thing. What's interesting here is apparently Ichabod is still around, or maybe they're just kind of pointing out why, just kind of giving you a marker. But as one of Eli's children, as one of Eli's descendants, okay, he is doomed to die early. If you remember, the curse against Eli's family is that none of your family will reach old age, kind of thing. And he says, so this guy is doomed to die early. He has the ephod, which is generally considered to be like the priestly robe. So the clothing that a priest would wear. And only. So it's not like, it wasn't like a fashion thing that anybody could get one. It was a very particular robe, and where the priest was, the ephod was. Where the ephod was, the priest was. This is going to come back here. That's why I'm making that distinction. Okay, so he's got a priest with him. Okay, so maybe he's grabbed this guy because Samuel gave him grief about the doing the sacrifice in chapter 13. So okay, fine, I'll get my own priest. I'm going to have my own priest guy here, okay, to do the sacrifice. Now, is Ahijah, is he a priest? Well, he's from a priestly family. Okay, he's got the ephod, so let's just give it to him. He's a priest.
Is there just one ephod, like the high priest ephod, or do all the priests have?
Well, I think there were different ones. I mean, there was more than one because there was more than one priest. There would be one particular outfit, as I understand it. I'm not a Torah expert here. As I understand it, the high priest would have a certain distinctive outfit, but it's a distinctive outfit. Like even now, if you saw somebody, in like a priest's garb in the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church or something, you would go, oh yeah, that guy's, if you see like somebody with just the collar, right? Just somebody, oh, that guy's, why would somebody wear that if they weren't a priest? It's not that stylish, but I don't know. I should come in next week wearing just to see if anyone notices, kind of thing. That would be one of those kind of weird things where I could walk in wearing that and then people would be like, okay, does he want me to say something? In which case I'm not. Does he realize what he's wearing? I don't, not that I would do that kind of thing. Of course not. So Eli's grandson is here. His family is still around. But Jonathan is, so that's kind of, this is where Saul is. Jonathan is wandering out toward Michmash. I forgot the name of it. Michmash. Okay, so Jonathan has a plan. So he goes in. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. So he's going kind of through, there's cliffs, and he's going through the middle of it. One was called Bozez, and the other Sina. One cliff stood to the north toward Michmash, the other to the south toward Geba. So Jonathan has a plan. Here's his plan. Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, come, let's go over to the outpost of these uncircumcised men. Okay, again, men not of the covenant, often used to refer to Philistines or non-Jews. Let's go over to these uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Okay, just sort of a perhaps the Lord. And then he says something: nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. That if the Lord is on our side, we're going to win. Okay, and so he goes out in confidence. Do all that you have in mind, his armor bearer said. Go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul. Which another way to put that is to say, my heart is your heart. These two are, these guys share the same brain. I mean, they are ready to go. His armor bearer is like, okay, whatever you say, Jonathan, I'm with you. Now, you imagine this. Now, they're by themselves. Okay, there's just the two of them. They're going through this pass, right? And you've seen all the movies where the guys ride through the pass, and you hear the sounds, and you wonder if there's people up there watching them or whatever. So they're going through this pass, and Jonathan turns to the guy and says, "Hey, listen, we're going to attack them. All right, I'm with you." Okay, it's like, whoa, I would be like, can I see a battle plan here? Have we worked this out? Just the details? Well, he does. He does have a plan. Okay, he says, Jonathan said, "Come on. We will cross over toward them and let them see us." Okay, so there's we're going to just an outpost area where there's 20 to 30 of them, but again, that's part of an army of 3,000. There's two of them. So the first part of this plan is we're going to let ourselves be seen. Okay, anybody watch it? I mean, I'm not a veteran. By the way, this is Veterans Day weekend kind of thing. I am not a veteran. I have seen a lot of war movies that in no way at all comes. But I've never seen one where the plan is always, all right, let's let them see us first. That's just never part of the plan. But it is when Jonathan's in charge here. Okay, we're going to let them see us. See, then we'll cross over. If they say to us, so we're going to get close enough that they can yell and talk to us, okay? If they say to us, wait there until we come to you, we will stay up where we are and not go up to them, okay? Now, this is kind of an interest. What are they going to, now this didn't happen, but I don't know what his plan was. If they did say, wait, we're going to come down to you, all right? But he says, but if they say, come up to us, we'll climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands. Okay, so now you're the armor bearer, and this is the plan. We're going to walk right into the middle of this scene. And if they say, come down, we're going to come down to you, we'll just wait here until they all come down. I'm guessing that his plan was if they say that, he's going to turn around and run, but that's just my opinion. That's speculation on my part. But if he says, come on up, then we're going to take that as a sign that the Lord has delivered them to us. Okay, now, again, this isn't just like push the elevator and walk up. I mean, this is climb up. Okay, this is not a good fighting point. You ever seen the movies where the person is climbing and somebody's throwing rocks at him or shooting at him or something? Okay, he's climbing up the mountain. Okay. And then it's like, okay, once we get up to the top of the mountain, we're tired from the climb up. Okay, we're covered with dirt. Maybe we've cut our hands. Then we're going to say the Lord has given them into our hands. Okay, now, I am no expert, but to me, this is a completely dumb idea. This is like insane, right? I mean, just makes no sense, okay? So, Jonathan has a plan. Let's attack them. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. We will let them see us. If the Philistines tell us to stay, then we will not attack. If the Philistines tell us to come on up, then it's a sign from the Lord. The Philistines see them, so up they go. Okay? So it says, so both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. Look, said the Philistines, the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in. Remember back in chapter 13, they said as they were waiting for Samuel, people were crawling in the rocks and behind trees and getting over the thing. And so the Philistines know what's happening. And they also know that that Israelites have been coming over. So maybe the Philistines think these guys are just going to come up and come over, give up, surrender. Maybe they recognize Jonathan as being the son of the king. I think, whoa, this is a great deal. But even still, this is a completely insane idea. Okay, this is nuts, right? I mean, this is just like, Why would you do something this dumb? And I think for what it's worth, on the surface, this is a completely dumb plan. Okay, that's the technical term. The Greek word there is dumb, comes from the Latin root dumb. Equally as dumb, easily, in my opinion, it is equally as dumb as sending a teenager armed only with rocks to fight a giant. So why don't we tell stories about Jonathan? Why don't we tell this story to the kids? Everybody's got a David and Goliath story, right? How many have heard a Jonathan and the Philistine story? I mean, you compare these two, they're like the same story. Because what happens? The men of the outward shouted, pardon me?
Same enemy.
Yeah, come up to us and we'll teach you a lesson. Okay? There's about 20 of them. They're all armed. There's 2 young guys climbing up this hill. And they're probably thinking this is going to be great. This is going to be great fun. Okay? So both of them show themselves, the men of the outpost coming up. So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. Okay? Now you got to love Jonathan's confidence here. He's like, hey, the Lord has given us, hey, this is it. I have faith. I'm going up there. And he says, Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet with his armor bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half an acre. Okay, so I mean, this is a pretty big deal. He gets up there, and guess what? The Lord fights, right? I mean, it's Jonathan against 20 people, at least 20, because that's how many died. I'm guessing there were more. Okay, so although let me go back here. I said, for what it's worth, this is a completely dumb plan. As dumb as sending a teenager armed only with rocks to fight a giant. But in both these cases, the heroes go out in faith, and the Lord delivers. Okay, David kills Saul with a Goliath, and I'm getting ahead of myself. I know. But David kills Goliath with a stone. Okay. Jonathan and his armor bearer go up there and kill 20 guys. So I mean, 20 against one giant against one. Who's got? I don't know. I mean, it's just, to me, it's like, why don't we talk about Jonathan? Why don't we tell this story? I'm kind of going through the Bible storybooks and going, okay, everybody's got a David and Goliath. We all know David and Goliath story, but we don't have a Jonathan and the Philistine story. Okay. I mean, I get that you got the whole David and Goliath thing and the big giant falling, and it's all great, and it's harder to celebrate with 6-year-olds, the death of 20 men. That's okay. So it's a little gruesome, but I mean, seriously, it's the same story. They do the same thing. Okay.
Should we assume? I have a weird reference, 2 weird references in my Bible for that verse when it says, if they say, come up, then the Lord has given to us. And the people who are helping me refer me back to Gideon. If this, then this.
Mm-hmm.
And then also Abraham's servant when he sees Rebecca. And if the girl, I'm going to take my camels, and if this, then this. But both of those previous times, there's a confab with God. God's in the mix. You don't see God in the mix here. And I can't for the life of me, other than the if this, then this scenario, why they put those 2 references.
Well, I mean, I think to a certain extent, I mean, Jonathan's going out in faith here. I mean, he's and we'll find out throughout the rest of that he understands that the Lord has picked David, and he's kind of, I mean, this is a guy that really, was walking, in the Spirit of God, walking in faith, so he just knew that, hey, we're in the promised land. We're the, so his actions were a matter of faith, and here, just this conversation, he's just laying it out there. If they say this, then that's our sign that the Lord has delivered us. You know, um,
How is this different from Gideon?
well, Gideon. Okay, go ahead.
Is it different from Gideon? Are you saying how is it, or is it?
I mean, Gideon laid out the fleece, and I've always been taught that that was the wrong way to approach it.
Well, you know the I don't- you know I
Gideon's asking for the fleece to me seems like a lack of faith. God told him do this, and he's like, well, just to be sure, can I do this? And if this happens, then
Well, to Rebecca's point, that he is asking, Gideon did ask God, and Jonathan, we have no record of him asking God.
except for when he says this is my basis of going. If God is for us, who can be against us, kind of thing. So, um, and you could say, I mean, if you want to remove God from the equation, you could just say, well, okay, Jonathan was just an amazingly talented soldier, okay, and he was able to, after climbing up a hill, kill 20 Philistines, all of whom were armed. Okay, well, that is perhaps true. Okay, um, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I mean, I think to me when he says he goes up there, he says earlier, let's go over at the outpost of these uncircumcised men. So he recognizes that he's part of God's chosen people. So he's saying, this is who I'm part of God's chosen people. They're not. I'm in the right place. They're not. Okay. Perhaps God, the Lord, will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. By few. He says, well, to me, that's a statement of faith. It's like, hey, I'm going out there. If the Lord can win with a few, and I'm a few, me and Clyde here, my armor bearer, this is a few, and I'm going to just prove my point. So to me, he's going out there in faith. The fact that we don't have a moment of prayer from Jonathan saying, okay, Lord, give me a sign. This is somebody that just is acting in faith, saying, and this is how he's going to know. And I mean, maybe he was just going to go out all along. He was just going to do that, and he's just telling the armor bearer. We only know about this because the armor bearer, maybe the armor bearer is the one that tells the story, because ultimately Jonathan dies. So maybe the armor bearer and his family is the one that tells the story. I don't know. That's just speculation on my part. Um, just so the armor bearer knows what's going on. Just so you know, here's what's going to happen. Because if they say, come on up there, that's going to be our sign from the Lord. Okay? Because, maybe the Philistines didn't want him up there. Maybe they wanted to come down and kill. I don't know. But again, to me, it's the same story. David and Goliath, Jonathan and the Philistines. It's the same story. It's similar to where it differs from Gideon is that Gideon starts out with 10,000 men. Then he goes from 10,000 to 3,000 to 300. I forget. There's two. He ends up with 300 men, but he starts with 10,000, right? Then like then there's one break, and he says, if you want to go home, go home. And then, or maybe he starts with 20, goes down to 10, and then it's like, okay, watch how they drink, kind of thing. Okay, so Gideon is being told to do the same thing with fewer and fewer people, kind of thing. Or maybe he's saying, listen, and again, maybe this is what Jonathan is thinking about. The Lord could have won that battle with Gideon with 10,000 people. He could have won it with 300, and he chose to do it with 300. Okay, whereas Jonathan is just looking around going, yep, just me and Clyde here. Let's go. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to be the leader. Somebody's got to, get these guys up from around the tree. It's going to be me. Okay. So, anything else? Any other?
Yeah, if I could just have a minute. I think that asking God for a sign or putting a fleece before the Lord, it can be right for one person and wrong for another, depending on circumstances. The Bible does say, don't believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see if they are from God. So I can see Gideon saying, okay, I've been commanded to this by grace. Is this really God speaking to me?
Mm-hmm.
How do I know? And so I don't think it was necessarily sinful for him to put a fleece before the Lord, because he's at a beginning stage where he has to verify, is this God or not? But you do see a tension. You see different things in the Bible. For example, when it is revealed both to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and to Zechariah, your wife, you're telling Elizabeth she's going to have a baby. How can I know that this is true? And he's rebuked by Gabriel. He said, I'm Gabriel. I stand before God. You're going to be deaf. You're going to be dumb. You won't be able to speak. And it's a strong rebuke. Maybe because he should have known better. He had been praying for a child, and he was a high priest. He had all this information. Whereas when Mary says, how can this be since I'm a virgin? She's not rebuked. Even though they seem to be asking the same question. I think that there's different knowledge involved as opposed to whether this person will be dealt with graciously and this person will be rebuked. Don't you dare ask for a sign. What's the matter with you? I'll try to tell, I'll abbreviate a story in 30 seconds or less. My mother was deathly ill before I was born, didn't know if she was going to live or die. She set a fleece before the Lord and said, Lord, if I'm going to live, would you please have Laverne come over today? Laverne was her sister who would help with the household duties. Laverne didn't come over that day. And so my mother went to bed thinking, okay, well, if the Lord answered my sign, I'm going to die. And she remembered Mrs. Thompson did come over. The one only time Mrs. Thompson came over. My mom didn't realize, since they were just not on a first name basis, Mrs. Thompson's first name was Laverne. Laverne did come over, it was a different Laverne. And my mother, in relating that story in later years, said, God graciously stooped to my level to grant me that sign. But I was wrong to ask for it. I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't recommend anyone else do it. I should have accepted from the Lord life or death, whichever it was. But I had to know, am I going to live to raise my family or not? And God stooped to my level, but I wouldn't do it again. Don't do that. Don't ask God for a sign. And so I think that you could have a tension between, if this happens, then the Lord's sign is this. That's dicey. That might be okay for Jonathan. It might be okay for Gideon, but don't think it as a fact.
Right. And this kind of gets into the idea that when you're looking at, and I pointed this out, when you're looking at narrative text, okay, and that is, it's a story. So and so did this and went there and this and went here. Things happen, and we believe they happen. We believe the text is correct. It's accurate as far as what had happened. But the narratives are not normative. Okay, because Samuel did this, because Saul did this, because Jonathan did this, that is not a license or a command for us to go and do the same thing. Okay, and that works in a lot of different levels, kind of thing. And that's the trouble when if you're building a contemporary application. There are certain books of the Bible that when your proof text comes from these books of the Bible, you kind of go like Acts. Even the Gospels. Jesus did this, we should do that too. Okay, that's problematic. I mean, that's kind of like the extreme. It's easy to sit there and say, well, don't do what Jonathan did. It's a little trickier to say, well, Jesus did this, so you should do it too. Or you shouldn't do it. Or that it's not incumbent on you to do exactly what Jesus did. Okay?
Going back to the comparison, you gotta help me with my timeline. Hasn't David already faced Goliath at this point?
Not in the text, no.
Not in the text, but in real life?
I don't know. See, that's the thing. The timeline is a little squishy.
He's young when he does it.
Yeah.
And by the time this rolls around, David's quite a bit older. Anyway, I don't know.
I think David and Jonathan are about the same age. My opinion. This is my opinion.
Maybe it's my perception from Sunday school or whatever, but because we always are taught the David and Goliath story that he was so young.
Right. He is young. I mean, he's a teenager.
Yeah.
He's old enough to be left alone with. I mean, let's talk about David and Goliath when we get to David and Goliath kind of thing. But I will say, and this is something that comes up, the outline or the timeline here is a little squishy. Okay, so again, the writer of Samuel is not writing according to the Journal of Historical Research standards. Okay, he is writing, or she is writing for a point, and it's kind of talking about the kingdom, the establishment and the development of the kingdom and the success of the kingdom, kind of thing. Okay, and so this portion of the text, this is a portion of the text where the stories here are here to tell us why Saul is not the king. Okay, because moving again, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but changing when you choose a king, and if you follow any history of places where they have kings, like England or France or something like that you don't you don't just pick a person. You pick the family. It's the family becomes the king. That's kind of the whole point, that you have this single, unified, never-ending source of executive leadership kind of thing. You know who's in charge. You will always have someone in charge, which is one of the reasons why having an heir was so important. Having, and you didn't just switch families easily, even at this point. And I think one of the reasons why this book is written is to kind of give an example of, okay, here's why Saul's family is not. Now, again, that kind of goes against all these great things I've been saying about Jonathan. I get that. But then Jonathan dies. But this is why Saul's family is not chosen, or why they're no longer the king. Okay, so he's going to pile on a couple of, here's this, here's this, here's this. And really, if you think about it, any book you read, any historical book, and I have read quite a few in my lifetime, it never is, the narrative in any given book is never like absolutely following the strict timeline, because they'll talk about this event, and then, okay, now while this event was going on, this event was going on, so we have to go back here, and then you're constantly doing this, but that's kind of just part of historical writing here. So I don't know, and that's one of the interesting questions to me, is what the actual timeline is. Okay, because you say right at the very first, the first story we talked about with the waiting 7 days, that's when Samuel tells Saul, okay, the Lord's rejected you. And yet here we've got a couple more stories where things happen and the Lord is talking to Saul, it appears, and like, okay, well, what's going on here? Did this happen first or whatever? It's just, these are three stories, three examples of why Saul is not the king anymore. Okay, and you've got a series of things in there, and we'll get to them. But if I get past this point, okay. So again, to me, Jonathan and the Philistines, to me, it's the same story as David and Goliath. It's the same story, which is a story that God delivers, right? That God delivers. God can deliver with many or can deliver with few. Okay, so God was going to deliver regardless of whether 51% of the people voted for this person or that person, okay, or whether 7 people voted for this person or that person. God is still going to deliver eventually, okay? So get off the really, let's go back to the text. Sorry. So where am I? So, but in both those cases, the heroes go out in faith and the Lord delivers. So they go up. Verse 15. Then panic struck the whole army. Okay, now this is something about the Philistine army. They seem to panic a lot. If you remember back in chapter 8, or when in chapter 5 or 6, I forget when the ark first comes into the thing, the Philistine army panics. Then when in chapter 8, when Samuel meets the Philistine army here now. So I'm not sure what happened. Maybe this outpost is out where everybody can see it, and suddenly they see people running. And maybe the people that are running don't realize that there's only 2 people. Okay, I read a book recently about the Black Hawk War. I think I might have told you this, but there's not much of a war. The wonderful state of Illinois and its governor managed to get rid of all the Indians out of Illinois. You notice there's no Indian. There didn't used to be up until about like 6 months ago. There wasn't any Indian reservations or Indian land or Indian casinos in Illinois because of the Black Hawk War. We kicked them all out. Yay, Illinois. Okay, but I say that sarcastically just for the record. I'll edit that part out so it doesn't come out. But in that, there's one of the battles in there is there's a group of Illinois soldiers that are approaching this place, and they run into 2 Indians. Okay, and there's like 50 guys that run into 2 Indians. And they kind of assume there was a very racist element, that they figured that the Indians were just going to roll over and give up, and they didn't. Okay, so they turned around. The Indians like, hey, no, we're not turning around. We're not giving up, and they started fighting back. And of course, a couple of people died, and it's confusing. And so like 40 of them ran, right, without ever actually seeing the battle, without actually seeing who they were fighting. They just knew, hey, there's something going up, there's screaming, there's noise, people are dying, and they came running back and the story was spread that there's a huge Indian army here. Okay, and there wasn't. There were 2 guys. Okay, so it could have been that, but everybody runs from this. Panic sets in the Philistine army, and it makes a lot of noise. We've got a lot of clanking. You know, they got a lot of chariots and metal banging on each other. It says, those in the camp, then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field, and those in the outposts and raiding parties, and the ground shook. So to me, now it could be that the ground shook because of just everybody pounding, or God could have sent an earthquake. While I'm at it, send an earthquake. Then it's like one of my favorite verses here. It was a panic sent by God. Okay, it was a panic sent by God. So the Lord is fulfilling exactly what Jonathan said. The Lord, nothing can stop the Lord from rescuing. What did he say here? Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. There's 5 times as many of them. We're outnumbered, outgunned, outmanned, outplanned, but we've got the Lord on our side. 2 guys climb a hill, kill 20 guys, the entire army panics. Okay. Saul's lookout at Gibeon Benjamin saw the army melting away in all directions. Then Saul said to the men who were with him, muster the forces and see who has left us. Okay, what's going on? It's like, how, who's not here? Or maybe, and it isn't, I don't think he's looking to see whether or not who's responsible for this. He just wants to, who's gone home? Who's not here? What do we have to fight with? We got to follow this up. Muster the forces. When they did, it was Jonathan and his armor bearer who were not there. Saul said to Ahijah, so they figured this out and said, okay, we got to do something. Saul says to Ahijah, and if you have an NIV, it says, bring the ark of God, because this worked so well the last time. Okay. Is it the ark? I don't know, because other translations, does anybody else have it where it says bring the ephod? Okay, so it's not clear what the word is. But Saul realizes, okay, bring the ark or bring the priest. Somebody, go get him. While Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the Philistine camp increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Now, this is kind of an interesting question here, and this is just kind of speculation. But to me, what is not happening here? What is not happening? So I think I have that in the question, right? So, yeah. Saul tells the priest, probably Ahijah, to withhold his hand. What is Saul not doing here? Think back to the problem in chapter 12. Saul doesn't want to go to battle before what?
Sacrifice.
Does a sacrifice. Now suddenly, this is too good an opportunity. Hold on. Let's just go. Now, that's speculation on my part. That's what's called arguing from the silence of Scripture, which is fun. Okay. Enjoyable. Okay. But, yeah. I'm just saying, he's telling the priest to not do something. And previously, he was very adamant that he needed a priest to do something. Now he's saying, don't do something. We don't know what. And there's no record of a sacrifice being made here. Okay. So, again, think of what the point, why are these stories in here? They're here to show you Saul's shortcomings. Okay, so people that understood, how this was supposed to work, and the original readers would have gone, ooh, wait a minute. There's no, this is Saul not doing something. Now, so then, I'm sorry, wrong page. Verse 20. Then Saul and all his army assembled and went to the battle. They found the Philistines in total confusion, striking each other with their swords. So maybe at that point he should have just gone back under, hey, listen, you guys are doing great without us. We're gonna sit back here. When you guys are done killing each other, let me know. But again, this is just, and this, if you read about battles, this kind of stuff happens a lot. That in the noise, in the confusion, in the movement, especially when you have large armies together, it's friendly fire. Okay, it's really what it is. People die from friendly fire all the time. Okay, it's a tragedy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make light of it. But basically, they don't know who. Then all they know is it's dusty, it's noisy, it's crowded, and there's a couple of crazy Israelites up here running around. I don't know, just start swinging in defense of whatever comes near you. Okay. That they found the Philistines in total confusion, striking each other with their swords. Verse 21. So what is Saul not doing? Then those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines and gone up with them to their camp, went over to the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. Okay, so think about this passage. This is an interesting point here. So apparently there are Hebrews, Israelites that have gone over to the other side. They're in the U.S. Senate. You declare yourself an independent, but you're going to caucus with one particular side or the other. Okay, fine. Like a huge difference, a distinction without a difference. But these are guys saying, listen, you know what? It's better to be on the Philistine side. Okay, the Philistines have all of the swords and the shields. I'm going to be over there. Now suddenly these Hebrews, who are just getting along real well, see that the Israelites are winning the battle, and they said, you know what? I seem to recall I'm an Israelite. I'm going to go back onto the Israelite side here. Okay, so they had gone up with them to their camp, and maybe this explains what the Philistines who told Jonathan to come on up thought was going to happen. They thought maybe, these are just another couple of guys going to surrender. Maybe they're just, okay, come on up, surrender. But we're going to teach you a lesson. That's kind of like they weren't like putting them through a processing center. I really think they thought they were going to just bring them up and beat on these guys or kill them. But these Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines had gone up with them to their camp, went over to the Philistines who were with Saul and Jonathan. Okay, so Hebrews who previously sided with the Philistines suddenly are with the Israelites. Okay, so once the Israelites start to win, these Hebrews switch sides. Okay, now put an asterisk there. Remember this point. Okay, because this is going to come back later when we talk about David. Okay, so remember this point. That's all. So I'm going to tell you. Just remember this point. Okay? So on that day, when all the Israelites who had hidden in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were on the run, they joined the battle in hot pursuit. Wow. So how do you get everybody on your side? You run a winning battle. Everybody wants to be on a winning team. Okay, so you got a bunch of Israelites here suddenly go, oh yeah, oh you guys are winning? Yeah, oh I'm with you. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if it hasn't already happened, you suddenly start looking in the next month or so for a lot of political types to suddenly decide, you know what? I know I said all those terrible things about this candidate or that candidate, but now that I think about it, now that it's a matter of my becoming a cabinet this or that or having a position here, it's really not that bad a thing after all, kind of thing. So, everybody wants to be on a winning team. So on that day, the Lord saved Israel. Okay. Just like what Jonathan said in verse 12. And the battle moved on beyond Bethaven. Okay, so the immediate threat is over. The existential threat is over. Okay, the Lord has rescued Israel. Okay, and now Saul has the opportunity to put it all away. Okay, what he does next is this is the chance to just get this out of our system altogether, or let's just eliminate this problem altogether. We'll find out how that works out next week. Any questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. You have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I don't have an articulate question.
That has never stopped me. Ask Debbie. She was.
It won't come out.
What's bothering you?
No. I'm trying to think back history. See, my Bible study is doing Judges.
Mm-hmm.
so I get, when we talk about chronology, and we're just finishing Samson, but there's still more Judges to do. And because the Philistines at the time of Samson were like in charge. I mean, Israel was almost losing its identity as God's people.
Hmm.
And so I'm just trying to think, there's a big gap of time that my Bible study hasn't gotten to, and I haven't been steady in this class.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think, are the Philistines still pretty much in charge, sort of governmentally, and there's like
In
Israel in Israel?
I don't know. In charge is quite the right word.
Is it like a
It's a constant presence.
Right.
It's a constant presence. It's a constant threat. And I think there are moments it kind of ebbs and flows. There are moments when the Philistines are in an ascendancy, and there are moments when they're not. When Samuel was the king, was in charge, the Philistines were like kept out. Okay, so Samuel is the only judge who's able to fully keep the Philistines from attacking. So they didn't attack Israel during all of Samuel's life, ruling life. And then with Saul and David, the Philistines are kind of just the main constant enemy, and because they were always there, and it just ebbs and flows sometimes depending on, like in Judges, you have that whole, they decide to start worshiping Baal and all of the things, and then they cry out, and the Lord raises up a judge, and the judge defeats that. But most of what's going on in Judges is not on a national scope; it's on a more regional area. So the Israel itself was not a unified political group. That's one of the effects of having a king, where it becomes a much more centralized than what it was. And I think that's one of the problems. I think the Lord wanted it to be a regional kind of group of individuals that worshiped Him and looked to Him for guidance and things like that. And they said, no, we like that whole structure like everyone else has. We want a king, which is why having a king was so bad, kind of thing. I had somebody, I don't know if I told you this last week, somebody challenged me. We were talking about the election, and I said, well, you probably wouldn't have voted for David. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't have. And it was one of the, you ever have somebody kind of does a question, they think this is a slam dunk, or you wouldn't have voted for David. No, I wouldn't have. I said, but that's not the right question. Whether David should or should not have been the king is not the right question. The right question is, should there be a king at all, kind of thing. And the answer to that is clearly no. God is like, make it clear, no, this is not what I wanted.
So
But
when God picked Saul, is that like yours to the
Che-
Israelites? Like, yeah, we're gonna give you this schmo who can't do diddly.
that's one way to look at it.
Which is like, then you think, oh, well, then God sets people up. That's not very loving.
That's one of the problematic.
Then you're gonna hit that circle.
Yes, you do. I mean, we talked about that when we talked about Saul's in chapter 13, where Saul is told, wait 7 days.
Yeah, right.
And Saul waits 7 days. And then, I don't know, 10 minutes after the seventh day ended, he's like, all right, Samuel's not coming. As soon as he finishes the sacrifice, Samuel. So is Samuel sitting there waiting? Is Samuel setting up Saul? We don't know. Again, this is arguing from the silence of Scripture. Great fun. But it's just kind of like, but it's not, this is not a history book in the sense that we think of it as it is a history book. It does tell a story. And so should Saul have waited more than 7 days? Yes, he should have completely waited. That was the point. You need to wait until I get here. Basically, I'm guessing what Samuel did is like, you need to wait till I get there to do the sacrifice. I'll be there in 7 days. What Saul heard was, after 7 days, you can do the sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, that's everything Saul does doesn't seem to be unlike Jonathan. Had any faith or anything. It's either like just
Well, after
God
in
protected us.
chapter 11, in chapter 11, after his first battle, he does come back and say, no, it's the Lord that saved Israel and all of that. And he does want to do the sacrifice at first. So it's tricky to me, going through. This is one of those, the details are never quite,
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to go, oh yeah, Saul bad, David good, David and Goliath good. Let's move on to Kings. That's fun, and it's like, but then you start getting into the passage and you go, wait a minute, that's problematic, and then you go, that's problem. I've been telling Debbie about this. Poor Debbie has to deal with this all week. I'm like, these questions are not as easy as you think they would be, based on we've paraphrased them all to a certain extent, and we just don't engage with the text, and we just allow the stories to be whatever, and we atomize the text in that we just look at it and find a verse that applies to my life and move on. Think, oh, okay, I need to be like David. Okay, well,